What's a true story from your life, paranormal or otherwise, that sounds made up but isn't? Story 1. Back in undergrad, I was doing research that involved soil sampling. I had several sites to sample in a wilderness preserve, full-day hikes, hours from the nearest road. For safety, I always brought a friend. One of the sites, way in the back of the preserve, always spooked me. It wasn't any more remote than the others, but something about it just felt wrong. One day, we were there as usual. I crouched down to take my sample, head down, totally focused. And then, out of nowhere, this terror rose up in me. No sound, no movement, just an overwhelming get out now feeling. I looked up and saw my friend's face. She had the exact same look. Without a word, she said, "We have to leave now." We didn't ask questions, we just ran, the entire way back to the car. To this day, we have no idea why. No weird noises, no animals, no people, nothing. But I am absolutely convinced we were in real danger. Our bodies knew it before our brains did. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I've got a strange one for you. Back when I was in high school, I had this assignment, interview a real working scientist. Luckily, my dad worked at the local university, and he put me in touch with a scientist who worked in a radiation lab. Sounded perfect, except nothing about what happened next was normal. Finding the lab was the first challenge. It was buried in the basement of an old building, past the janitor's storage rooms, dark hallways, flickering lights. It felt more like the setup to a horror movie than a science project. Finally, I met the scientist. He was an older man, kind, and surprisingly eager to talk. At first, it was all about the science, but when the interview ended, he drifted into his personal life. That's when things took a very unexpected turn. He told me he'd been a sailor during World War II, serving on an escort ship in the freezing North Atlantic. His stories started out like war memoirs, endless storms, sleepless nights, the constant fear of enemy submarines. But as he spoke, his voice grew heavier, his emotions rawer. And then he told me something I never expected, something that felt less like a story and more like a confession. One night during a lonely watch, he was confronted by a crewmate, someone who had a grudge against him. Words escalated, tempers flared, and in the heat of the moment, fists flew. His shipmate hit his head hard, collapsed, and didn't move again. Panicked, terrified of the consequences, the scientist admitted he pushed the body overboard into the freezing, stormy ocean. No one saw. By morning, the sailor was simply listed as missing at sea. I sat there frozen, realizing I hadn't just interviewed a scientist for my school project. I had just listened to a man unburden himself of a secret he had carried since the war. Needless to say, I ended that interview quickly. TLDR, I went in for a school project and walked out with a decades-old confession to a wartime killing. Story 3. I've told this one before, but here's what happened. Years ago, me and some friends were driving out to a party in the middle of nowhere. Long country road, nothing around, no gas stations, no houses, just endless fields. Out of nowhere, an ambulance comes flying past us. It's going fast. As it passes, one of its back doors swings open and a small cooler tumbles out, bouncing across the road and almost hitting our car. We turn around, stop, and check it out. The lid's cracked open, ice scattered everywhere. We look inside, and there's a human finger. Total panic. We slam the cooler shut, jump back in the car, and floor at 80 miles an hour trying to catch up to this ambulance. But it's gone. We pull into the next gas station and call 911. We tell the dispatcher what happened, and she immediately starts yelling at us for pranking 911. We're confused, try to explain, and she says we don't have any ambulances out in that area tonight. Now we're floored, but we still drive to the closest hospital and hand over the cooler. They check, no patients with a missing finger. They call the police, we give statements, and eventually go home. A week later, I get a call from a detective. He tells me they never found the ambulance. They checked every dispatch record on paper and computer, and there were no emergency vehicles anywhere near that area. To this day, no one knows where that ambulance came from or whose finger it was. Story 4. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I had this one special place, a huge pine tree on the mountainside right behind my backyard. It was massive, so tall it felt like it touched the clouds. I climbed it almost every day just to see the view from the top. One evening, I decided to climb up for the perfect view of the sunset. The sky was already glowing orange and pink, and the air was cool and still. I was about halfway up the tree when I heard a strange sound, branches shifting somewhere nearby. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head, and there it was. On a branch directly across from me, not more than a few feet away, sat a mountain lion, just chilling, watching me, its golden eyes locked on mine. My heart stopped. My hands started shaking on the bark. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. I knew I couldn't run. I couldn't scream. So inch by inch, I started climbing down the tree as slowly and quietly as I could. The whole time I could feel its eyes following me. Finally, when my feet hit the ground, I didn't run. I just walked back home, every step feeling like a mile, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life. Story 5. About 10 years ago, me and my mom were sitting in the living room watching TV on a sunny afternoon. The big balcony doors were wide open, blinds pulled back, sun pouring in, not a cloud in the sky. Then, out of nowhere, everything went black. I don't mean a cloud passed over, or it got dark like a storm. I mean pitch black. No light anywhere. Not from the sky, not from the TV, not from anything. It was total absolute darkness. Both of us screamed. And just as suddenly, the light came back. It couldn't have lasted more than 2 or 3 seconds. But when we looked outside, the sky had transformed. Gone was the bright blue. It was now a solid blanket of dark clouds and rain was pouring down. It lasted 2 or 3 minutes, then the clouds broke and slowly the sun came back. Nobody else we know experienced the blackout, but a friend did say they noticed the weather changed almost instantly from beautiful to terrible without warning. We even checked for eclipses or weird weather reports. Nothing. No explanation, no official record, just me and my mom sitting there stunned, asking each other, "What the hell just happened?" Story 6. So picture this. We're at a big family lunch. Everyone's talking, eating, laughing. It's just normal, until my uncle, through marriage by the way, finishes his meal. And then, I swear on everything, I see him grab a large, crumpled up paper napkin and eat it. Not pretend, not nibble, he ate it. The crazy part, no one else saw it. Everyone else is just chatting away like nothing happened. I'm sitting there losing my mind, looking around the table like, hello? Did nobody just see Uncle Napkin over here swallow a whole paper product? Later, when I told my family, they refused to believe me. Oh, you must have mistaken it for a piece of flatbread. Flatbread? No, he did not casually wipe his mouth on a piece of pita like it was Bounty 2-ply. I know what I saw, and to this day, I'm the only witness to the Great Napkin Incident. Story 7. A few summers ago, I went prospecting and camping with my partner and his dad in a national forest in southern Oregon. Our mining claim was miles from the nearest town, way up scary Forest Service roads. We set up camp near a stream in a big clearing. It was remote, quiet, exactly the kind of place where you know no one else is around. One night we were sitting around playing cards. My partner and his dad had been drinking, so they were pretty loud, but then I heard it. A guttural scream. They didn't hear it the first time, but when I got them to quiet down, it came again, this time from a different direction. The second scream sounded higher, almost feminine. That alone was terrifying, but it didn't stop there. Later that night, we heard a sound coming from the stream like someone plunging their arms into the water and lifting them out, over and over. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like something was washing something in the creek. And then the rocks started, small rocks thrown at our tent. It was the worst night of my life. I've never been so scared. And the worst part? I still have no explanation for any of it. Story 8. When I was a kid, I lived with my mom and stepdad. Things at home were tense, and I had the option to go live with my dad instead. One day, my stepdad drove me out to a secluded area in the woods. In the trunk of the car were an axe, a chainsaw, and black bags. On that drive, he told me something no child should ever hear, that if I went to live with my dad, something terrible would happen to me, and that my mom supposedly agreed. He gave me 2 weeks to change my mind. I was terrified. My dad, probably on advice from his lawyer, couldn't do much beyond telling me, if you don't show up at school one day, tell one of your teachers why and have them call me. So that's exactly what I did. My teacher was a mandated reporter, which immediately triggered a CPS investigation. When they questioned my stepdad, he denied everything. But my dad's lawyer obtained security footage from McDonald's, which matched details I'd told CPS, and used it to prove I was telling the truth. In the end, my dad got full custody, but for months after, I couldn't sleep, terrified that something would still happen. Story 9. Late last year, I was snoozing in my room early one morning, lying on my back. After about 10 seconds, I felt something tap the tip of my toe, 3 times. I sat straight up, looked around, nothing. Freaked out, I curled into a ball and somehow managed to fall back asleep. Later that same day, I got a gut feeling not to sleep in my room that night. I left the door open and went to another room instead. When my brother came home, he tried to close my bedroom door. As he reached inside for the handle, he heard something snarl at him. He slammed the door shut and ran into the room where I was, completely freaked out. I barely slept that night. At that point, I called a friend of mine who's much more into psychic stuff. He spoke with an old Chinese healer about what was happening. Their conclusion? Apparently, there was a portal in my bedroom, right next to my bed, and for whatever reason, a werewolf-like entity had come through and was hanging out there. I know it sounds insane. I had trouble believing it myself, but they performed a ritual, closed the portal, and sent whatever it was back. And after that, no more tapping, no snarling, no nightmares, nothing. Story 10. Back in the late 1990s, I was divorced, single, and drinking way too much Mountain Dew. Around that time, Pepsi launched their Pepsi Stuff promotion, where you could collect points from bottle caps and trade them in for prizes. One of the top prizes, a leather jacket. And I thought, you know what? I've never owned a leather jacket. Why not? So I started collecting points. To enter, you had to sign up for a free Yahoo account. Once I did, I figured I might as well look around the site. That's when I stumbled across Yahoo Personals, basically the online dating ads of the 90s. Most of the ads were honestly terrible, and I thought, I could write a better one than this. So I used their 30-day free trial and posted my own. And I got exactly one reply, just one. But here's the crazy part, she had also signed up for the free 30-day trial just to reply to me. We started chatting on Yahoo, played some Yahoo games, talked on the phone, and eventually decided to meet up. She lived about 45 minutes away. We met, clicked instantly, fell in love, and got married. It's the kind of story you'd expect in a Hallmark movie, right down to her dumping a loser boyfriend just before we got together. Oh, and yes, I did get the leather jacket. Still have it to this day. Story 11. A couple of years ago, on Black Friday, I woke up around 2 a.m. with this weird feeling. Not just I can't sleep weird. It was this heavy, eerie sense that something was wrong. I went upstairs and stood in my parents' kitchen, trying to shake it off. Less than a minute later, my mom comes out. She looks at me and says, "Are you feeling weird?" I said yes. She said she was feeling the same thing. We just stood there in silence for a minute or two, both of us unsettled and not knowing why. Then the phone rang. It was my grandmother. My grandfather had woken up at 2 a.m. with severe chest pains and was being rushed to the hospital. Later, we found out he was about 5% blockage away from the Widowmaker heart attack, and he'd also suffered a minor stroke. My mom and I are both very close to my grandparents. It still gives me chills to think we might have felt something was wrong at the exact moment it was happening. Story 12. I completely lucked out in a job interview once. I showed up 15 minutes early and was told I could wait in the hiring manager's office. On his desk were a bunch of company pamphlets. Out of sheer boredom, I picked one up and started reading. He was running a little late, so by the time the interview actually started, I'd basically read the whole thing cover to cover. The first question he asked me was, "So what do you think we do here?" And without even planning it, I just recited the pamphlet. Mission statement, values, key services, the whole thing. He looked at me, impressed, and said, "That's a pretty good answer." The very next morning, I got the job offer. Fast forward 6 months, I was doing really well. During my 1-year review, he pulled out one of those same pamphlets and said, "Be honest. Did you read this before the interview?" I couldn't help but laugh, confessed the whole story. And instead of being annoyed, he cracked up, gave me a glowing review and a raise. Story 13. When my mom was 22, she went to Sanibel Island, Florida for spring break with her sorority sisters. One night, she and 2 roommates walked down the beach to hit a few bars. Other sisters joined later, and everyone ended up splitting off and heading back to the hotel at different times. My mom and her friend left around 3 a.m., walking the beach back to their room. When they got there, they realized one girl, we'll call her Michelle, was missing. One of the sisters said she'd seen Michelle outside the bar smoking with a man she didn't recognize. Michelle apparently had a reputation for wandering off with guys, so no one thought much of it. It was spring break. But by morning, Michelle still hadn't come back. While searching the beach, one of the sisters heard that a body had been found earlier that morning. They called the police. It turned out to be Michelle. She had been stabbed to death and left on the beach sometime in the early hours of the morning. The investigators estimated she'd been killed around 1 a.m., which meant my mom and her friend had drunkenly walked past her body on the sand just hours later, completely unaware. And of course, they could have unknowingly passed her killer, too. The case was never solved. Even today, my mom gets visibly shaken telling the story. Story 14. I spent a year living in the Congo, and one weekend some friends and I hitched a ride out to the coast. On the way back to Kinshasa, we managed to catch a ride in a UN Jeep, one of those open-top, no-doors rigs. We're cruising along at about 30 mph on a dirt road carved into a steep hillside when we spot a herd of wild buffalo down in the valley. Then the bull notices us. He starts pawing at the ground from over 200 yards away. We laughed. No way he's coming for us. No way he could catch us from that distance. But then, he charged. We kept watching as he got closer and closer, and then bam! That buffalo timed it perfectly. He came barreling up the hill, slammed into the back of our Jeep, and spun us around like a toy. We skidded sideways and crashed into the hillside, facing the wrong direction. By some miracle, the Jeep didn't flip and nobody was hurt. We just sat there in shock, jaws hanging open. The bull, now about 50 yards away, shook his massive head, probably sore from hitting us square on the rear wheel, then trotted back down the hill to guard his herd. The UN driver calmly grabbed a crowbar, bent the wheel well back into place so the tire could move again, and just like that, we carried on our way. Story 15. When my mom was 18, she started noticing something strange. Every night, as soon as she was alone, someone would tap on the window of whatever room she was in. It didn't matter if the curtains were drawn. It didn't matter which room. It happened every night for 3 months, and every time someone else came in or went outside to check, the tapping would stop. No one was ever there. Then it stopped. 2 weeks of silence. My grandpa and both uncles, who all lived in the house, decided to go fishing one evening, leaving my mom alone. The sun had just gone down. She was sitting on the couch in the living room, reading. Tap, tap, tap. She rolled her eyes, thinking it was her younger brother Jesse, always joking around. Jesse, knock it off. Tap, 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 tap. Jesse, it's not funny. Just get inside. Tap, tap, tap. She stood up, walked to the window with the curtain still drawn. Very funny, Jesse, she said, and tapped back through the curtain. What she heard next wasn't a tap, it was a hand slamming against the glass. Right then, the phone rang. It was my grandpa calling from the neighbor's house. They'd stopped in to dress their fish. Well, take Jesse back with you, and make him stop slamming on the windows, she said. Rhonda, my grandpa told her, Jesse is here with us. Oh shit. She dropped the phone, ran to the door, and locked it. My grandpa and uncles sprinted up the road. When they got there, they saw a man standing in the bushes by the front window. When they started yelling, he stood up and he looked at least 7 feet tall. He bolted toward the fence. My grandpa swears he saw the man clear the 7-foot wooden fence without touching it, legs completely over the top. They were only seconds behind him when they vaulted the fence to chase him. But on the other side was nothing, just flat dirt and grass. No trees, no houses, nowhere to hide, and he was gone. The tapping never happened again. Story 16. I spent a year living in the Congo, and one weekend some friends and I hitched a ride out to the coast. On the way back to Kinshasa, we managed to catch a ride in a UN Jeep, one of those open-top, no-doors rigs. We're cruising along at about 30 mph on a dirt road carved into a steep hillside when we spot a herd of wild buffalo down in the valley. Then the bull notices us. He starts pawing at the ground from over 200 yards away. We laughed. No way he's coming for us. No way he could catch us from that distance. But then he charged. We kept watching as he got closer and closer, and then bam! That buffalo timed it perfectly. He came barreling up the hill, slammed into the back of our Jeep, and spun us around like a toy. We skidded sideways and crashed into the hillside, facing the wrong direction. By some miracle, the Jeep didn't flip, and nobody was hurt. We just sat there in shock, jaws hanging open. The bull, now about 50 yards away, shook his massive head, probably sore from hitting us square on the rear wheel, then trotted back down the hill to guard his herd. The UN driver calmly grabbed a crowbar, bent the wheel well back into place so the tire could move again, and just like that, we carried on our way. Story 17. I live in a very homogeneous neighborhood. White, middle class, everybody knows everybody. I had just gotten a cat who I adored, but who, honestly, was an idiot. One day she climbed a tree with no branches until the very top 20, maybe 25 feet up, and refused to come down. My contractor neighbor had helped me get her down from another tree once before, but this time he said, "Sorry, can't do anything. Too thin, no branches." I sat there until 2 a.m. hoping she'd come down. Finally went home and crashed on the couch. At 4 a.m. there's this loud knock on my door. I open it and there's a man, fully decked out in camo gear, face paint and all, holding my cat. In a thick Russian accent, he asks, "Is this yours?" I'm stunned. How the hell did you get her down? I climb. That tree had no branches. In my training I learned climb, it, no problem. I tried to offer him money, asked where he lived, but he just shook his head, looked almost concerned or maybe amused and walked away. I never saw him again. Never even heard another Russian accent in my neighborhood. And now my cat? She stays indoors. Story 18. Back in the preclinical years of med school, we all had to go through anatomy lab. For those who don't know, that's where medical students dissect cadavers as part of learning human anatomy. One of the labs had a donor whose tag said they'd passed away from complications of kidney failure. Straightforward enough. But while the team was working on the leg and buttock muscles, they suddenly stopped. They'd found a bullet just sitting there, lodged in the gluteus medius. It had nothing to do with the cause of death, totally unrelated, just a surprise souvenir waiting to be discovered. And honestly, I like to imagine this man, when signing the paperwork to donate his body to science, chuckling to himself, thinking, one day a group of med students is going to dissect my butt and get the weirdest surprise of their lives. Story 19. One night in college, after a party with a few beers and joints, I stumbled back to my dorm with my suite mate, my best friend of 4 years. We went to bed like normal. The next morning, I woke up to something out of a horror movie. My pillow, sheets, and comforter were soaked in blood. Not urine, not anything else. Blood. The entire left side of my face was caked in dried black blood centered around my left ear. I panicked. My suite mate panicked. He said, "You might have had a stroke. We need to go to the hospital." We went straight to the ER. The doctors took one look at me and were shocked. Here's what they found. My left clavicle had broken through the skin. I had a nasal fracture, a radius skull fracture, 2 fractured vertebrae, bleeding in my brain. The blood had punctured my left eardrum on its way out, and the left side of my face was paralyzed. I had no memory of anything happening, no pain, no recollection of a fall or an attack. The hospital called the police. They suspected someone had assaulted me. 2 Yonkers PD officers questioned my suite mate. He swore I'd been drunk but safe, and that I'd gone to bed with him right there. No fight, no fall, no break-in. The police checked security footage, questioned our friends. Nothing. No one came in. The room was locked from the inside. No window entry. No blood anywhere except my bed. No obvious way for such catastrophic injuries to happen without leaving external marks. To this day, I still have no idea what happened to me that night. I've mostly recovered physically, but the mystery of it, waking up broken and bleeding with no memory, still haunts me. Story 20. I work in a job where there's constant pressure to make connections and bring in business. Right before I went on holiday, I got an email from a small company asking if I'd hop on a Zoom call with them in the next couple of days. But for once, I decided to set a boundary. I told them, sorry, I won't be available for a few weeks. Then I packed my bags and left for a holiday about 500 miles away. A few days in, I was exploring the countryside, enjoying the fact that I was completely switched off from work. Eventually, I ended up at a quiet rural bus stop, waiting for the next bus back to my hotel. Only 1 bus an hour, so I was just standing there, enjoying the sunshine, not thinking about work at all. Then I turned around, and right behind me was the office building of the exact same company that had emailed me days earlier, the one I'd told I couldn't possibly meet with. So there I was, 500 miles from home, with time to kill, standing outside their front door on the same day they'd wanted to talk to me online. The universe definitely has a sense of humor. Story 21. A friend of mine had just moved into a new house and kept saying he heard weird noises coming from underneath it. He said the place gave him bad vibes. I brushed it off like a skeptic boss. One day, I was over at his place in the middle of the day, which honestly kills the horror movie vibe, and he suddenly stops mid-sentence. "Listen," he says. We both hear it, a faint tapping noise, then a slam. You can get under his house through a door beneath the back porch, so we go out there and find it sitting wide open. No wind, no reason for it to be open. We just stand there staring, already getting creeped out, and then right in front of us, the door swings shut. And the bolt lock, which you have to push really hard through the bracket, slides closed on its own. We were stunned, just frozen. He tells me it still happens all the time. Story 22. So a couple years ago, I had something happen that started as the worst thing ever, but somehow turned into the best deal I've ever made. I'm heading out the front door when my wife yells from the back of the house, "Stop that guy in the yard." I'm like, "Why?" She shouts back, "He just went to the bathroom in our yard." I run outside and see this sketchy-looking guy walking away. Everything about him screams trouble. So I yell, "Hey, did you just do that in my yard?" He laughs and says, "No." Right on cue, my wife storms out and yells, "Liar, I saw you." At this point, the guy just chuckles and keeps walking. And suddenly, I go full Joe Pesci. "Where you going, buddy? You think you can just walk away from this?" Now remember, we live in a quiet neighborhood. People are peeking out their windows, wide-eyed, because here I am marching after this guy, yelling and filming him like I'm in a crime show. He gets to the corner, and a car pulls up. His friend leans out of the window all tough and goes, "Is there a problem?" Oh, I let it rip. "Yeah, there's a problem. That guy just did something nasty in my yard." You could hear my neighbors gasp, and then comes the twist. The driver turns to his buddy and goes, "What? That's disgusting. And guess what? You're cleaning it up." Turns out, the driver, his name's Paco, actually mows lawns in our neighborhood. And the guy who left the mess, he works for Paco. So the three of us walk back to my place. Paco makes his employee clean everything up while I'm standing there roasting him the whole time. And while this is happening, Paco glances around and goes, "Hey, who does your lawn?" As luck would have it, our lawn guy had just quit. So my wife says, "You, if you want it." Long story short, Paco became our lawn guy, gave me a price that was too low, so I paid him more. He's been with us ever since. Super reliable, always looks out for us. And the other guy, he still works for Paco, but whenever he's on our property, Paco rides him non-stop. So yeah, someone pooped in my yard, but I walked away with a lawn guy, a cleaner yard, and a neighborhood ally. Story 23. When I was 13, I was in my room having a pillow fight with my 9-year-old nephew and 5-year-old niece. We were laughing, having a blast, just kids being kids. Then my nephew suddenly yelled, "Stop." I turned around and saw my bedroom doorknob. It was slowly turning side to side. We froze and just watched it. It felt like forever. Finally, I worked up the courage to reach out and open the door. The knob kept moving under my fingers until the door was completely open. No one was there, just the empty hallway. I ran out and asked my sister and my grandma if they'd been doing it. Both said no. The three of us decided to continue our pillow fight in the living room after that. Later, when everyone left, my curiosity kicked in. I tested every possible way the knob could move by itself. It was a stiff, rusty knob, hard for even me to turn, impossible for kids, and turning it from the outside wouldn't make it move on the inside. In the end, I concluded something physical had to be moving it, and it would have had to be right next to me. That was just the first of many unexplainable things that happened in and around my bedroom over the next 4 years. Story 24. I dropped out of high school at 15. After that, I bounced between call center jobs with no plan, no prospects, nothing. Office work crushed me. I was miserable. At my lowest points, I was even suicidal. Then one day, at one of those jobs, I met a girl. She was an aspiring author. We became friends. One day she said, "You seem smart. Can you help me figure out how to become an author? If you do, I'll make you my manager and share my royalties with you." I didn't have anything going for me, but I had her dream to focus on. And honestly, that became the thing that kept me going. Helping her gave me a reason to get out of bed. Fast forward 10 years, we're still best friends. I helped her become a best-selling author. We've sold millions of books. We live just up the road from each other. We're both happily married. And me? I barely work 10 hours a week now. My job is simply to help her with her books. That's it. I basically won the lottery. That's exactly how it feels. Story 25. 1996 had been a rough year. My first marriage ended, my father died, and my job had gone downhill. By the time I finally had a few days to myself, I gave myself a present, a Greek cruise. It was my 31st birthday. In the middle of the night, I wandered the sleeping ship, eventually stepping outside to take in the moonlight, the distant islands, the ocean breeze. It felt like a new beginning. And then I saw it. A light on the horizon, seemingly following another cruise ship. At first, I squinted, trying to figure out what it was. Then it moved far faster than any boat I'd ever seen and zipped over to the next ship, hovering beside it for a few minutes. Before I could even process what I was seeing, it started to grow and I realized it was coming toward my ship. It matched our speed and hovered just a few feet above the ocean, just a few feet away from the rails where I stood. It wasn't small. It was a massive cylinder, maybe 10 feet wide and at least 50 feet tall, lit with blinding floodlights around its top, middle, and base. The lights were so bright they obscured its surface, but I thought I saw circular openings or portholes. And it had stopped directly in front of me, the only person standing there. We were moving fast. I could feel the ship rising and falling under me, but the thing just hovered. Then, just as quickly, it zipped off toward the next ship ahead of us. Only then did I remember I had a camera hanging around my neck. By the time I raised it, the object was a speck of light, indistinguishable from the others on the horizon. I have no explanation for what I saw. I'm a skeptic, a facts and logic person. This is the one event in my life I have never been able to explain. Story 26. My sister has faked her own death not once, but twice. The first time was back in 1998. I was 3 months pregnant at the time. One night, while I was at work, someone called my house pretending to be a Colorado State police officer. They told my husband that my sister had been killed in a car accident. He rushed to my work to break the news, and I'll never forget it. I screamed. I nearly passed out. My whole family went into shock. For 3 days, my parents, my ex-brother-in-law, and I were desperately calling around trying to find out what happened, where her body was, and how we could bring her home. We missed work. We were drowning in stress. My dad was a wreck, and the long-distance phone bills alone cost hundreds of dollars. Then, at 3 in the morning on the third day, my parents got a phone call. It was my sister. She was laughing hysterically. She actually asked them how they liked the joke she'd played. Fast forward to this year, she did it again. I wasn't directly involved this time, but I found out through family that she had people spreading the word she died, and then a month later, it came out that she was still alive. At this point, I don't even know what to say. She's literally faked her own death twice. Story 27. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. Yes, that Roswell. One Friday night in 1999, my brother and I were lying in bed trying to fall asleep. I was 8, he was 5. Everyone else in the house was out cold. Then, right as my clock flipped to 1:30 a.m., our room exploded with light. Not a bright flashlight, not headlights, a blinding white light more powerful than anything I'd ever seen, pouring through the window. And at the exact same moment, the loudest sound I've ever heard, metallic, explosive, filled the room. I thought I imagined it, but my brother was crying. I could hear my dad scrambling, my mom swearing, my sisters crying. My dad grabbed his gun, bolted outside, and set off our alarm. I followed him. The sky was perfectly clear. No clouds, no storms, nothing. My dad did a lap around the house, came back to the door and told me, "Go back inside. It's 3 in the morning." That threw me because I'd literally just seen my clock switch to 1:30. I went back to my room, rolled over, and looked at my clock. It read 3:15. Story 28. Several years ago, I was working in chain food service when I met a customer I'll never forget. Let's call her Ruby. She stood out for 3 reasons. First, she asked about my former manager who had just gone on maternity leave. Second, she gave a really unusual name for her order. And third, she had this striking presence. A tall, confident woman in a gorgeous dress, clearly in the early stages of transitioning. Not something you forget. I passed along her greetings to my manager, then didn't think much more of it. Fast forward a couple of years, I'm working with that same manager again, and she's telling me about her close friend Ruby. Ruby had gone through a rough time. She came out as trans, thankfully had a supportive wife, but then lost both her father and brother within a year. My heart broke for her, and then it hit me. Wait, I've met this woman before. She'd been that unforgettable customer in my store years earlier. Eventually, Ruby and I friended each other on Facebook. We didn't talk much, just occasional comments. Until one day she posted photos from her sister's wedding, including then and now pictures of her sister as a child. And that's when it hit me like lightning. I knew that little girl. I knew her family. I knew their house, their couch, their Mario Party sessions, and her mom's legendary lasagna. Ruby wasn't just some customer. She wasn't just my manager's friend. She was someone I had known deeply, over a decade earlier. In fact, before her transition, Ruby had been the very first person I ever dated, back when we were 14. The glow-up was so complete that she had once stood right in front of me, and I didn't even recognize her. It took me a week to build up the courage to reach out. We'd ended badly back in high school, and I didn't know what to expect, but she remembered me, and she wanted to meet up. That was a few years ago. We're not super close, but we still talk now and then. She's doing well, her family's healing, and every time I think about it, I'm still floored. The world is so small. Story 29. I grew up in Roswell, New Mexico. Yes, that Roswell. Anyway, one night in 1999, right when my clock flipped to 1:30 a.m. on a Friday, my younger brother and I were lying in our room, just talking and trying to fall asleep. I was 8 at the time, and he was 5. Everyone else in the house was asleep. Suddenly, a blinding light filled our room. I mean, the brightest light I had ever seen in my life. It poured in through the window like daylight on fire, and at the exact same moment came the loudest sound I've ever heard. It was metallic, explosive, deafening. There was no buildup, no warning, just instant flash and instant boom. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, but my brother immediately started crying. From elsewhere in the house, I could hear my dad scrambling around, my mom swearing, and my 2 sisters crying too. My dad grabbed a gun and bolted outside, setting off our alarm as he went. I followed him out into the yard. The sky was completely clear, not a single cloud anywhere, just stars. My dad made a run around the house and came back to the doorway. He told me to get back inside because it was 3 in the morning. That comment threw me because I knew my clock had only just switched to 1:30 right before the flash. But I didn't argue. I went back to my room, pulled the blanket over myself, and rolled over. That's when I saw it. My digital clock was glowing back at me, but instead of 1:30, it read 3:15. Almost 2 full hours had passed, but I had no memory of it at all. Story 30. Right after high school, my dad got a girl pregnant. Things didn't work out. She was already with another guy, planning to marry him. My dad wasn't in a good place, so he signed away his rights and her new husband adopted the baby. Fast forward 18 years. My parents are divorced, remarried, and I have a stepbrother. Here's where it gets wild. My stepbrother's best friend is actually my half-brother. Problem was, my half-brother had no idea that his dad wasn't really his dad, but the resemblance to my dad was undeniable. He looked exactly like him, so when there was a real chance he might be brought around my sister and me, the truth had to come out. They ended up sitting everyone down, including my half-brother, and telling him the truth about who his real father was. It was one of those life-changing reveals that ripples through the whole family. And as if that wasn't enough, here are the coincidences. My mom and I share a birthday, and my half-brother's twins, they share a birthday too. Sometimes life really does feel like one big soap opera. Story 31. When I was in high school, I played in a band with two of my closest friends. We mostly performed Christian music, which meant the higher-ups at our church saw us as safe enough to let us have access to the big empty building at night for rehearsals. We took full advantage, setting up practice about once a week after hours. One night, we'd been playing for quite a while and decided to take a break. We were sitting around on the stage, joking, decompressing, and then our conversation just sort of trailed off into silence. In that stillness, we began to hear something faint in the distance, a voice. We were supposed to be the only people in the church, and the doors had been locked. The church also had a history of break-ins, so our minds immediately jumped to intruder. We grabbed flashlights and fanned out through the massive building, checking every hallway, every room. It was dark, cold, and completely empty. We came back to the stage with a weird, heavy feeling and sat there again to listen. After a minute, the voice returned. This time, my friend walked over and pressed his ear right against one of our speakers. And that's when we realized the voice, a woman's voice, was coming through our speakers. Faint, but clear enough to make out phrases like, "He will return to us." It sounded like a line from a horror movie. We started to freak out. We unplugged every microphone, every amp, every piece of gear we had, one by one, just to see if it would stop. But the woman's voice kept whispering through the speakers. Our system wasn't even tied into the church's PA, it was our own setup. Every source of sound was accounted for and powered down. We'd already searched the entire church to make sure we weren't picking up someone's conversation or a hidden tape, but the building was absolutely still and silent. That was it for us. We packed up and called it a night. I'm not religious anymore, but even now I get chills thinking about that night. We practiced in that church plenty of times afterward and never heard the voice again. Whatever it was, I can't explain it. Story 32. I've got two wild family stories for you. First, the glue incident. My sister had just gotten a cat, and while she was moving out, the cat stayed with us for a bit. My mom's allergic, so one night she woke up with watery, itchy eyes. Half asleep, she reached into her bag for her allergy eye drops. Problem was, my mom also kept a little bottle of crazy glue in there for fixing her acrylic nails. Yep, she grabbed the wrong one, put crazy glue in her eye. She felt burning immediately, couldn't open her eye, realized what she'd done, and we ended up rushing her to the hospital in an ambulance because I was too young to drive. She had to wear an eye patch for a while until the medication helped it heal. Thankfully, she's totally fine now. Not blind, just one insane story we laugh about today. And then there's the Thanksgiving turkey heist. That year, my uncle wanted to watch football, but all of us kids outvoted him and put on cartoons instead. My mom backed us up, which made him furious. He stormed out, but he wasn't done. He sent his wife back into the kitchen to steal the turkey right out of the oven. So when the timer dinged, my mom opened the oven expecting dinner and found nothing. The turkey was gone. My grandma started crying. We were all panicking, and in the end, we had to haul ourselves over to my aunt's house just to salvage Thanksgiving. Wild times. Story 33. Earlier this summer, my husband and I spent 2 weeks house-sitting for my aunt. One night at 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a voice shouting, "You!" It was so loud it startled me upright. I've had parasomnias before, even episodes of exploding head syndrome, so I told myself it was nothing and went back to sleep. Around 6 in the morning, my husband and I both suddenly woke up drenched in sweat. All the animals in the house were going nuts, barking, meowing, climbing onto the bed. That's when we realized the air conditioner had shut off. All the clocks in the house were blinking. The power had gone out at some point during the night, and now we had no idea what time it really was. My husband checked his phone for the time. But here's the weird part. His phone's clock matched the blinking clocks. It hadn't been plugged in, and cell phones keep time automatically, but somehow it had been reset too. We got up, figured things out, and went to work. I didn't think about the outage again until late that night. Scrolling Facebook, I noticed my aunt had uploaded a photo of my grandfather's grave. It was the 12th anniversary of his death. Instantly, I got a weird, tingling feeling. I ran upstairs to the bedroom where I still hadn't reset any of the clocks. It was about 10 p.m., but all the clocks were 4.5 hours behind, meaning they'd been reset around 4:30 a.m. That was the exact time of my grandfather's death, 12 years earlier. Let me repeat that. On the anniversary of his death, the power went off at the exact time my grandpa died. My husband's phone clock, which wasn't plugged in, reset at that exact moment. At the time it happened, I had no idea it was the anniversary. I only realized the significance that evening. My grandpa is badass. Story 34. I was on a small boat in Colombia, heading from the beaches of Cartagena over to Tirabamba, when suddenly, the motor died. We were just drifting. At first it didn't seem too bad, but then the swells started turning the boat sideways. That's when it got real. Powerless. We were just rolling with the waves, and every swell felt like it could tip us. The guy running the motor had no plan, no idea what to do, but as we drifted, I noticed we were getting closer to the island, and some very long piers stretched out over the water. I figured if we got just close enough, I might be able to make the jump. So I grabbed a rope from the bow of the boat and waited. The guy at the motor told me not to, but hey, he was the one without a backup plan. So I timed a swell, took a deep breath, and jumped with everything I had. At the time, I was young, athletic, and just barely made it. I landed on the dock, tied the rope off, and pulled the boat in. The people on board, they started cheering. That feeling standing on that dock, having just saved everyone, I felt like a total badass. And honestly, I rode that high the rest of the day. Story 35. I'm a nurse, and I've been working in a nursing home for over 2 years now. I've always worked the graveyard shift. After seeing so many people pass on my shift, I've gotten used to death. It doesn't scare me anymore. I've heard every ghost story that runs through the facility at night, and for the most part, I've learned to block the chills out. But there are times when you just can't. One night, we had a new admission, an elderly woman who kept asking for pain medication. I was busy and didn't get to her right away. After her third request through the CNA, I looked up and saw her standing outside her designated room. I literally saw her, standing in the hallway. I pointed for her to go back inside, and she slowly turned and went back into her room. I ended up giving a Valium to the CNA and told her to give it to the lady. Things were hectic, and I didn't check on her again for about 2 hours. When I finally did, she was soundly asleep. During morning report, when the day nurse comes in and I go home, I told her the lady had gotten a PRN pain pill after getting up. Later that day, when I returned for my shift, the nurse asked me, "Why did you tell me she can walk?" I said, "Because I saw her walking last night." The nurse looked at me like I'd lost it. She told me the woman is bedbound. She's a Hoyer lift transfer. She hasn't walked in 7 years. I tried to replay what happened in my head, thinking maybe I'd mistaken someone else for her. But nobody in that entire hallway can walk. They all use wheelchairs. To this day, I can't explain what I saw. Story 36. A while back, I developed chronic muscle twitches. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to freak me out. So I booked an appointment with a neuroscientist to make sure my brain was fine. I walk in expecting a normal consultation. Instead, this licensed medical professional hits me with the Twilight Zone. He tells me, never get vaccinated, avoid all gluten, unplug my TV at night. 5G towers and the government are trying to control me. Oh, and he personally had his brain zapped by secret military police in Virginia in 1972. Also, super intelligent beings are watching the human race from space. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there like, "Sir, I have muscle twitches." I actually recorded the whole conversation with my phone hidden in my shirt pocket just to prove to myself later that I hadn't imagined it. The guy's got a PhD, a license, a lab coat, and he's telling me things that sound like a rejected X-Files script. Part of me still likes to imagine maybe he is some hidden genius, and the rest of us just can't grasp his esoteric knowledge. But honestly, he came off like a total lunatic. Story 37. I got struck by lightning in my sleep once. Maybe I was about 14 years old, asleep in my room. In my dream, my sister, my friend Sarah, and I were playing in the woods behind our house. Suddenly, storm clouds rolled in, and the sky turned dark. Lightning began crashing all around us. I yelled at my sister and Sarah to run back to the house. It was about a mile away. We were sprinting as fast as we could, leaping over rocks and dodging strikes. I could see my house ahead when all at once lightning hit me and held me inside a beam of light. I was trapped in a shell of electricity. It was painful. I tried to pull myself out, and then I woke up. The overhead light in my room, which had been off when I went to sleep, was now on. The outer shell that houses the light bulbs was shattered. Glass was all over me and the bed. I tried to get out of bed but immediately collapsed to the floor, unable to get my legs under me. Crawling into my sister's room, terrified, I tried to wake her up but couldn't. Eventually, I fell asleep on the floor of her closet. In the morning, I was fine. The glass was still shattered on the bed, and no one believed me. Story 38. I go to anime conventions, and back in 2007, I was at one in Austin, Texas. At the time, some cosplayers would wear the same outfit all weekend. By Saturday afternoon, let's just say the smell could get intense. Well, one guy apparently decided he was going to fix the problem. He shows up dressed in camo, holding 2 cans of cheap local brand air freshener, and he starts spraying cosplayers and yelling, "Take a shower." The first 2 people he sprayed just stood there stunned. Some panicked and ran. I completely froze. Then he went after a young woman. She ducked, and he ended up spraying her directly in the face, right in her eyes. She let out this blood-curdling scream. That's when security finally got to him and hauled him off. The weirdest part, about 2 years later, I saw someone on a website talking about the incident. They were calling it an urban legend, saying there's no way it ever happened. But nope, I was there. I saw it happen with my own eyes. Story 39. I have one story I've pretty much stopped telling because nobody ever believes me. About 6 years ago, on Halloween night, my best friend and I were hanging out. Trick-or-treaters had gone home. The street was completely quiet. We were sitting in her driveway, just looking at the stars, chatting a little, but mostly silent. I had my head tilted up toward the sky when she nudged me and whispered, "Look." She was pointing across the street. At first, I had trouble making out what she meant, but then I saw it. It was a small cylindrical light floating about 10 feet above the asphalt. It wasn't stationary, but drifted slightly as if with the breeze. It gave off a faint golden glow. Very pretty, almost like a glow stick in size and color. We just watched it. She looked amazed. I was scared out of my mind. Then it did a small circle in the air and shot upward, disappearing. Shortly after that, another floating light appeared, but this time it was a purplish-blue sphere about the size of a tennis ball. It was moving faster than the first one. We watched as it pitched forward and zoomed right past our heads into her neighbor's side yard, which we could see from where we were standing. The light it gave off reflected off the neighbor's pale stucco wall, so even when we couldn't see the object itself anymore, we could still see the glow. Eventually, it faded away completely, leaving me scared out of my mind and her far more curious than I was comfortable with. I dragged her back inside before we were abducted or something. It's the only truly unbelievable thing that's ever happened to me. Story 40. Back in high school, me and a buddy used to roast each other constantly. I was really good at it, and one time I told him, "You're so ugly you'd have to roofie yourself just to masturbate." It was just a dumb joke at the time. Fast forward a few years, we're at a bar, hanging out with 2 women who were clearly into us. Things are going well. They go to the bathroom, and that's when I see my buddy drop something into one of their drinks. I realized immediately what he'd done, and in that moment I had to think fast. We were all drinking Sam Adams, so while he was distracted, I managed to swap his drink with hers. The women came back, he downed the drink, and I told him we'd be right back. I pulled the women aside, explained everything, and we left. No hookups, no second thoughts. It was just way too disturbing. I never spoke to him again, but I'm still friends with those women more than 20 years later. Story 41. When I was working offshore in Southeast Asia, I discovered a superpower. I am a god at haggling. The locals couldn't believe the prices I was getting. My coworkers would be in the middle of bargaining, and I'd step in like, "Nope, walk away." To me, it wasn't shopping anymore, it was war. Pretty soon, I got nominated head haggler for the whole trip. Everyone just gave me their shopping lists, and I handled it like a second job. I found a vendor I liked, and we got into a rhythm: meet once a week, swap last week's counterfeit goods for cash, haggle over the new order, then sit down for lunch together. We even took turns paying. After a few weeks, he invited me to go party at his boss's club. Now, everyone told me not to go. The local coworkers said, "That's Triad territory. You'll get robbed or killed." My American coworkers thought it'd be a kidnapping setup. Even our cab driver, who we had on contract for all our trips, was begging me not to. So of course, I went. It was straight out of a movie. I walk down this narrow, wet alley, knock on a door, say the word, and suddenly I'm in a warehouse. Suited guys everywhere, probably armed. Long walk through junk, music pulsing in the distance, and then boom, a full-on club. Drinks rained down as soon as I sat. I got introduced to the boss, or maybe the boss of bosses. Shook his hand, he pointed at a spot, and suddenly I was living like VIP. I even met a Hong Kong celebrity. No idea who, forgot the name instantly, but when I showed the photos later, everyone freaked out. The band playing was a local favorite, doing covers. They even gave me a signed CD of their original stuff. I danced, partied, had the night of my life, and when I finally stumbled out to leave, my cab driver was parked right there. Pretty sure he'd been waiting all night in case I called, just to make sure I got out alive. Story 42. When I was little, I always treated my slightly older cousin, Kay, like she was my sister. I didn't have a sister, and Kay was the funniest, smartest person I knew. We'd been close for as long as I could remember. Around the time I was 14, Kay disappeared. My crazy aunt started rumors about cults or an accidental pregnancy, but the truth was that nobody really knew where she was. Fast forward to me being almost 18, about to graduate high school. One night, I had a dream that felt different. In the dream, my parents, who had been divorced for years, my brother, and I were walking around Disney World. I was lagging behind like I always did at that age. I glanced at a little shop along the street, and there was Kay. I checked to make sure nobody was watching and ran over to her, bombarding her with questions. She just said, "I'm working at Disney in Orlando. Please let the family know I'm safe." I gave her a weird look and ran back to my family. Then I woke up. It felt like it had really happened. I almost never remember my dreams, but I remembered every detail of this one. A few months later, I'd turned 18 and graduated. I came home late from work one night, and my dad said, "They found Kay. She's working at Disney in Orlando." I was floored. I hadn't told a single person about that dream. I've since talked to Kay about it, and she said she'd been praying for God to send someone a message at that exact time. But I'm an atheist. I have a logical explanation for everything. Except this. To this day, I'm still baffled. Story 43. A couple weeks ago, I had 2 nightmares in a row. The first one seemed insignificant at the time, until the second night. Night 1. I'm sprinting full speed down an empty New York City street. No cars, no people, just me. I turn my head and lock eyes with it. About 6'3", glowing blood-red eyes. It's just standing there watching me run. Then it grins, a huge, toothy smile. I look forward, take a left, and stop at a newspaper stand. I glance back. Nothing. I look down at the newspaper and wake up. It felt random, meaningless. Night 2. This is where it gets real. The dream picks up exactly where it left off. Me standing at that newspaper stand, staring down at the paper. I don't remember what it said, but it wasn't important. I look up. It's there, a few feet away. Now I can see it clearly. 6'3", ragged, ripped clothes, glowing red eyes, long, sharp claws, enormous razor teeth. Not just a man completely black like a shadow, but solid. It stares straight into my eyes and says, in a low demonic voice, "This is a nightmare. This is a nightmare." I yell back, "No, it's not a nightmare, it's a dream." It answers, "It's not a dream, it's a nightmare." Those words echo in my head, over and over, louder, darker. I wake up. Only the words, they're still going. A freezing sensation flows over my body. I'm pinned to my bed. I can't move a muscle. My eyes are wide open and I'm freaking out. It's getting hard to breathe, like something is choking me. My eyes dart around the room, and then they meet a pair of glowing blood-red eyes, the outline of a tall 6'3" demonic creature. Suddenly, everything stops. I can move. It's over. I blink. My eyes seal shut. The freezing sensation floods my body again. I'm stuck. I can barely open my eyes, but when I do, I see the shadow again in my room, staring at me. I try to cry out for my mom, but nothing comes out. Hopeless. Then finally, my eyes open fully and it stops. Everything stops. I'm lying there with my eyes wide open, too scared to even blink. I blink. Nothing happens. It's over. And then I remembered. When I was 7 or 8, I used to see this same thing staring at me at night. I used to hear it walking around my room. This is by far the creepiest and most unexplained thing that's ever happened to me. Story 44. Last summer, I had a very strange experience on a camping trip in a national forest in Colorado. It wasn't an official campground, but there were about 6 groups of campers along the edge of the forest, all within about 1,000 feet of our site. All of the other campers had guns with them and had been shooting all day long. We didn't bring any. About 15 of us, all between 18 and 25, were sitting around a campfire late at night, drinking heavily. Some of the group had done some drugs. We started telling ghost stories, childish maybe, but older kids tell scarier ones, and by 3 a.m. we were already freaked out. That's when we heard a pack of coyotes howling far off in the distance. In Colorado, that's normal, usually right after they've killed a rabbit or something, so we didn't think much of it. About 10 minutes later, the coyotes howled again, closer this time, and immediately afterward we heard about a solid minute of rapid gunfire. We started to panic. It was 3 a.m. Were the other people shooting at the coyotes? Another 10 minutes went by, the howling again, this time even closer, then more gunshots. It felt like the coyotes were moving from camp to camp and the shooting was following them. We couldn't see any of the other campsites since they were all tucked in the forest, but after this happened a few more times, howling, then gunshots, each time closer, we decided to run and hide inside the camper. In our drunken state, we left out all our burgers, brats, s'mores, and beer. We all passed out pretty soon and nobody heard anything else that night. The next morning, our entire campsite was trashed. All the food was gone. Some of the chairs were torn. The trailer had a flat tire. The worst part is still not knowing whether we were actually in danger or if the whole thing was alcohol and drug-induced paranoia. Story 45. This happened a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5. I was home alone with just my dog, sitting in the living room watching Lost. Suddenly, I heard the back door open and then close in the kitchen. My dog lifted her head and stared into the hallway. From where I was sitting, neither of us could see into the kitchen. I paused, lost, and called out, "Hey, who's home?" No reply. Then I heard footsteps moving toward the living room, stopping just outside the hall. I got up, slowly poked my head around the corner. Nobody was there. Friends and family had always told me about other creepy things that happened to them in that house. Here are some of them. My aunt was once sleeping in the basement living room when she woke up, opened her eyes and screamed. She claimed she saw a child sitting on her chest, staring into her eyes. She shut her eyes, and when she opened them again, the child was gone. Another time I had several friends over in that same basement room. Everyone passed out wherever they could, several people on the floor. One of my friends said he was lying there trying to sleep when he heard the door open and small footsteps running toward him. He looked up, nothing. My mom has weird stories too. She says she woke up one morning and saw an old woman sitting at the end of her bed, talking to herself. I have more, but I'll share just 2 from my mom. Years ago, a friend of hers was spending the night in the room she and my aunt shared. Their grandmother used to sleep in that room when she stayed over, but she had died several years before. That night, her friend woke up and saw an old woman standing at the foot of the bed, staring at her. She screamed and woke my mom. When she described the woman, my mom showed her a picture of their grandmother. It was her. Another time, when my mom was about 11, she walked in the back door and started going down the stairs. At the bottom was an old man, all dressed in black with a black hat and white hair, just standing there staring at her. She ran upstairs to get someone. When they came back, he was gone, but there was a big white arrow drawn on the wall behind where he had been, pointing to the haunted side of the basement. A few months later, she was in church with her family. The seat behind her was empty. During the sign of peace, she turned around. The same old man, dressed exactly the same, was behind her. He put out his hand. She shook it. It was cold as ice. When she turned around again, he was gone. Her brother, my uncle, once saw a little girl in an old-fashioned sweater standing in the upstairs hall. He tried to talk to her, but she just stood there and stared. We've all seen or heard things in that house, and no one in the family can explain them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.